The sky over Viridian 9 had turned dark faster than usual. Kalen Merrick, a human farmer with rough hands and a steady heart, looked toward the horizon, squinting against the gusts that shook his small farmhouse. The twin suns were sinking, throwing long shadows across the cracked silver fields. The crops had taken all his care to grow, yet the wind now threatened to rip them apart. Kalen tightened the straps on his weathered satchel and scanned the horizon again. He had lived all his life here, where storms came without warning and most humans would hide. But Kalen knew hiding wouldn't save anything, not his farm, not his family, not even himself. A sudden roar of wind split the air. Lightning, violet and jagged, forked through the sky, striking dangerously close. Kalen ducked instinctively, gripping the edges of his coat, heart pounding. He had felt many storms, but this one was different. It carried a sense of hunger, like the planet itself was angry. The air smelled sharp and electric. Even the usual creatures that skittered across the plains had vanished. Kalen felt the weight of isolation heavier than ever. He was alone here, and this storm would not wait. Then came the sound. A cry. Small, high-pitched, and terrified. Kalen froze. It was not like any animal he had ever known. It cut through the wind, desperate, pleading. His heart thumped harder. He scanned the jagged cliffs at the edge of his property. There, barely clinging to a rocky ledge, was a small creature. Its scales shimmered like molten metal, catching the dying sunlight. Wings far too tiny to hold it against the gusts flapped frantically. It was a dragon hatchling, alone and exposed to the storm. Most humans would have turned away. Most would have stayed safe behind doors and walls. But not Kalen. He ran toward the edge of the cliffs, boots sliding on wet stone, arms outstretched. The wind pushed back, violent, almost as if it wanted to throw him off. Lightning danced close enough to make him flinch, but he didn't stop. Every instinct in his body screamed danger, but another voice, the voice of responsibility, of courage, drove him forward. The hatchling's eyes were wide, panicked, filled with trust it had no reason to give. It chirped, wings quivering, and Kalen knew it would die if he didn't act fast. He reached it just as a lightning bolt split the cliff above him, sending dust and rock tumbling down. He lunged, gripping the hatchling tightly against his chest, feeling its tiny heartbeat hammering against his own. The wind tore at his coat and hair. Rain began to fall, cold and stinging. He held on. He could feel the creature shaking, terrified and fragile. Kalen's mind raced. He needed shelter, something solid, somewhere safe. The ruins of an old farm building stood nearby, half collapsed but enough to block the worst of the storm. He ran, ducking under loose beams, sliding across mud and rubble, the hatchling clinging to him as if it knew he was its only chance. Every step was a battle. The wind was relentless, rain blinding, but he kept moving. Courage alone wouldn't be enough. He had to be smart, careful, precise. One slip and both of them could be gone. Finally he reached the ruin and ducked inside. The walls were cracked, the roof barely holding, but it was shelter. He dropped to his knees, still holding the hatchling, feeling its tiny body tremble. His own chest heaved with exhaustion and fear, but he couldn't let himself relax. The storm had not passed. It raged outside, battering the walls, making the building groan and shake. The hatchling looked up at him with wide, intelligent eyes, and Kalen felt a strange connection, as if it understood that he had risked everything to save it. He glanced out the broken window and saw movement, shapes darting in the storm. He couldn't tell if it was debris or something alive, something watching. His stomach clenched. He had saved the hatchling from the wind, but he was not safe. Viridian 9 had many dangers, and predators were just as likely to arrive as the storm. His mind worked fast. He needed to plan to protect both himself and the creature. He would have to think like the storm, like the predators, and use every ounce of human cunning he possessed. The hatchling chirped softly, its wings twitching as if trying to comfort him as much as he comforted it. Kalen felt a surge of determination. He could not let this world win, not here, not now. If he survived tonight, if the hatchling survived, they could both make it. But he knew the morning would bring new challenges, ones the storm alone could not prepare him for. Something had been set in motion tonight, something that could change everything. He wrapped the hatchling in his coat, whispering words of reassurance, even as the storm continued to rage. Lightning flashed, illuminating their small shelter, and in that brief light, Kalen's eyes hardened. He was not just a farmer anymore. He was a guardian, and he would not fail. Outside, the storm screamed, but inside, a spark of human courage burned bright. And then, above the roar of the wind, he heard it again, a sound that made his blood run cold. Something else was out there. Watching. Waiting. The storm had passed, but the world felt no safer. Kalen Merrick crouched in the ruin, the hatchling still wrapped in his coat, its tiny claws brushing against his hand. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the air was thick and heavy, carrying the scent of wet earth and ozone. Every gust of wind made the old walls groan, and every shadow seemed alive. Kalen's instincts screamed at him. They were not alone. He had heard the rumors his whole life: Varkal raiders, merciless predators that hunted dragonkind for their scales and rare fire glands. Colonists whispered about ships moving silently across the plains, eyes glowing in the dark, ready to strike at anything alive and valuable. Most humans never saw them, but the stories were enough to make a person cautious. Kalen now knew those stories were true. Outside movement caught his eye. Shadows twisted in the broken trees. Shapes slipped across the mud, deliberate, controlled. Kalen's grip on the hatchling tightened. He whispered softly, though he knew the creature probably didn't understand the words. "Stay quiet. Don't make a sound. Not yet." The hatchling chirped softly in response, and for a moment, Kalen felt its trust, fragile but real. He needed a plan. The ruin provided shelter from the storm, but it was no fortress. The walls were cracked, the roof unstable. If raiders approached, they could smash through in minutes. Kalen scanned the debris: broken beams, old farming tools, a rusted water tank. He worked quickly, dragging boards to reinforce the walls, stacking stones to block entryways. Every movement was calculated. One mistake, one misstep, and both of them could die. Hours passed, each one a test of nerves. Kalen set makeshift alarms, bits of metal tied to string, balanced precariously to clang at the slightest touch. He checked the hatchling, its small head resting against his chest, eyes closing as it tried to sleep. Kalen's heart ached. He hated seeing it so frightened. But he could not let sentiment blind him. Survival depended on clear thinking, on courage, and on the relentless will to act. Night fell, and the plains became a shifting ocean of darkness. Kalen peered through a gap in the boards. In the distance, faint glows appeared. Or reflections from distant storm clouds still lingering over the cliffs. He could not be sure. The Varkal were patient hunters. They waited, observing, learning, striking when their prey was weakest. Kalen felt the cold edge of fear, but he turned it into focus. Fear could sharpen the mind. Panic would kill him. He began improvising defenses. Using old cables and farming drones left to rust, he rigged traps outside the ruin. He pulled together stones and sharp metal, creating spikes hidden in the mud. He rigged pulleys that could swing boards across potential entryways. Every trap had a purpose, every placement calculated to slow down or injure an intruder. The hatchling watched, tilting its head as if trying to understand the human logic. Kalen smiled faintly. It was small, but the creature seemed to sense his determination. Suddenly, a shadow moved closer, too fast to be wind-blown debris. Kalen froze, listening. A hiss carried on the wind, low and alien. His pulse quickened. It was them, the Varkal. His mind raced. He could not outrun them. The ruin offered limited cover. Fighting head-on would be suicide. He needed to outsmart them. Every trap, every obstacle had to work perfectly. He adjusted a cable, retied a metal hook, checked a weighted lever. The hatchling shivered but stayed calm in his arms, sensing that he was ready. The first strike came without warning. A creature lunged from the darkness, claws scraping stone. Kalen pulled a lever. A board swung down, hitting the attacker with a thud that echoed across the ruin. The creature yelped and stumbled. Another moved from the side. Sparks flew as it hit a hidden cable Kalen had anchored to the floor. He reacted instinctively, using his weight to push the hatchling out of harm's way and kicking debris to slow the second intruder. The battle was chaotic, violent, but every move was precise. Kalen's human ingenuity kept them alive. The hatchling chirped, its tiny wings fluttering against his chest. Kalen felt a surge of responsibility stronger than fear. They had survived the storm together, but the planet was testing them further. He realized that intelligence and courage alone might not be enough. He needed leverage, something the Varkal did not expect. He scanned the ruin again, noticing an old storage tank half buried in mud. If he could tip it, the water and debris might block the attackers long enough for him to escape or gain control. The night stretched on, every sound amplified by tension. Kalen could feel the eyes of the hunters, calculating and waiting. But he also felt something else, a spark of defiance. He was human. Small, fragile, but clever. Resourceful. Determined. No storm, no predator, no alien would take what he had saved without paying a price. He whispered again to the hatchling, almost as if he was convincing himself, "We're not finished yet. Not by a long shot." And then, just as the first pale light of dawn touched the horizon, movement shifted outside. Something larger than the raiders, something he had not expected, approached through the fog. Kalen stiffened, heart hammering. The hatchling pressed closer to him, trembling. The night's dangers were over, but morning had brought a new threat, one that would test every ounce of his courage, intelligence, and human determination. Kalen pressed the hatchling tighter against his chest, feeling its small heartbeat racing with his own. The fog on the plains swirled like restless spirits, and shapes moved just beyond the ruins' broken walls. He could hear claws scraping mud and stone, the low hiss of the Varkle hunters as they closed in. Every sense screamed danger, but he forced himself to think, not panic. Panic would get them killed. Only cunning and courage could save them now. He scanned the ruin again. The walls were weak, but he had prepared traps. Wires, pulleys, sharp boards, but he knew they could not hold for long. The Varkle were patient. They could wait out a human if necessary. He needed an edge, something unpredictable. His eyes landed on the ridge to the north, where the abandoned weather stabilizers stood, relics of a failed human effort to control Viridian Nine's violent storms. Most settlers avoided them, claiming they were dangerous, unstable, or haunted by failed experiments. But Kalen saw opportunity. He whispered to the hatchling, "We're moving. Stay still and trust me." Its small wings fluttered nervously, but it stayed in his arms. He checked the traps one last time and then, crouched low, he darted out into the fog. Rain still fell in fine sheets, making every step slippery, but he ran with determination. He dodged fallen branches and rocks, ducked under ruined beams, and timed his movements with the faint gusts of wind to mask their approach. Behind him, the faint sounds of Varkle pursuit echoed, but he refused to look back. Focus, not fear, would carry him. As he climbed the slope toward the ridge, he realized the storm's lingering energy could help him. The stabilizers could amplify the residual storm power, maybe even direct it like a weapon. But operating them would be dangerous. One mistake, one misconnection, and the energy could tear the ridge apart, or worse, kill him and the hatchling. He calculated risks, measured angles, and made quick adjustments in his mind. Humans were fragile, yes, but capable of things no other species could achieve when they combined courage with intelligence. The Varkle were close now. He could hear the scrape of claws on stone, the low growl that promised violence. He increased his pace, leaping over jagged rocks, arms holding the hatchling securely. Finally, he reached the stabilizers, half buried in mud, their metal surfaces slick with rain. He set the hatchling down for a brief moment and checked the controls, remembering lessons from old colonist manuals. His hands moved with precision, connecting wires, adjusting energy conduits, setting the system to redirect the storm's force outward. One wrong move and the machines could explode. But Kalen trusted his own mind, honed by years of surviving Viridian Nine's unforgiving environment. A shadow passed overhead, a scout ship, small but fast, its lights glinting in the fog. The Varkle were closing the net. Kalen's pulse quickened, but he did not waver. He finished the final connection, taking a deep breath, and activated the stabilizers. A surge of energy arced through the sky, lightning striking from the ridge in brilliant, violent streaks. The scout ship shuddered, sparks flying, then fell back, temporarily disabled. Kalen's traps had slowed the Varkle, but this was the turning point. He grabbed the hatchling and moved to higher ground, eyes scanning for other threats. The creatures on the ground faltered, uncertain. The humans' technology, combined with his own quick thinking, had given them a taste of something they had not expected: human ingenuity in the face of impossible odds. The hatchling chirped again, small wings twitching as if celebrating the victory, but Kalen knew it was far from over. The Varkle regrouped, their movements more cautious now. They had learned that brute force alone would not defeat this human. Kalen's mind raced. He had to anticipate their next move, predict their behavior, and stay ahead. Every second mattered. He spotted a narrow ravine leading down the ridge. If he could lure them there, he could use the storm energy and the terrain to his advantage. He whispered a plan to himself and to the hatchling: "We move fast. One chance, one shot." He sprinted toward the ravine, keeping low, feeling the hatchling's tiny claws digging into his coat. The Varkle followed, now wary, careful not to trigger the last traps. Kalen led them over slick rocks, through fallen trees, every step calculated. At the right moment, he triggered a section of the stabilizer, sending a bolt of concentrated energy into a metal outcropping near the edge. Sparks and debris flew, cutting off the Varkle path, forcing some to retreat, others to stumble. The hatchling chirped loudly, excitement or fear he could not tell. Kalen ignored it, focusing on the next sequence. Finally, the Varkle broke formation, their attack faltering. Kalen looked down from the ridge, chest heaving, and realized he had done what most humans could not. He had used courage, quick thinking, and human ingenuity to survive against creatures stronger and faster than him. The hatchling looked up at him with wide, intelligent eyes, as if recognizing that its small life had been saved by something uniquely human. The storm's energy lingered, the fog beginning to lift. Kalen knew this was only a temporary victory. The Varkle would not give up so easily, and the hatchling was still weak and vulnerable. But in that moment he felt the truth of human resilience. Fragile in body, yes, but unstoppable when driven by courage, determination, and intelligence. He gathered the hatchling into his arms once more, heart steadying, and began the careful descent back toward safer ground, every step a test of patience and wit. And then, as dawn's first light broke across the plains, illuminating the battered stabilizers and scattered debris, he spotted another threat approaching, larger, faster, more dangerous than anything he had seen before. The morning had brought a new challenge. One that would require every ounce of human courage and ingenuity he possessed. Dawn spilled across the plains of Viridian 9, pale light cutting through the lingering fog. Kalen Merrick crouched behind a shattered ridge, the hatchling pressed against his chest. His body ached, muscles tight from hours of running, climbing, and fighting. The stabilizers had slowed the Varkle, but now something larger approached. Faster, smarter, more dangerous. The Varkle scout ships were gone, but in their place, massive predators moved through the mist. Their scales glinted in the morning light, and their eyes, cold, calculating, locked onto the pair like living lasers. Kalen swallowed fear. Most humans would have panicked. He had no choice but to act. He scanned the terrain quickly. Rocks, mud, debris, broken trees, every element of the ridge could become a weapon if he used it correctly. The hatchling whimpered softly, small wings twitching nervously. Kalen whispered, "It's okay. We'll make it. Trust me." The hatchling chirped, a tiny sound of hope and understanding, and Kalen felt a surge of determination. The predators approached in silence, disciplined and deadly. Their claws dug into the mud as they moved, and their low hiss cut through the quiet morning. Kalen knew a direct confrontation would be suicide. He had no weapons except his mind, his traps, and his human ingenuity. He set the hatchling gently down, shielding it with his body. "Wait here," he said firmly. Its small eyes followed him as he ran toward a narrow ravine, a natural funnel that could limit their attacker's movement. He worked fast. Using ropes, old cables, and fallen metal beams, Kalen rigged the ravine like a trap. He anchored boards to rocks so they could swing with momentum, set weighted logs on precarious ledges, and connected cables to the last of the stabilizer's residual power. Every connection had to be precise. One slip, one miscalculation, and the energy could collapse the trap on him as easily as the predators. The first predator lunged, massive and fast, its claws scraping stone. Kalen triggered the first pulley. A board swung, hitting it across the chest. It growled in surprise, stumbling into a weighted log. He had predicted its movements perfectly. Another predator advanced, faster, more cautious. Kalen adjusted a cable, causing a spark to flash into a puddle of water. Electricity arced across the mud, stunning it long enough for him to leap aside. The hatchling watched, wings twitching, its tiny body trembling with adrenaline. Kalen could feel the strain on his body, the exhaustion gnawing at him, but he refused to stop. His mind worked faster than his muscles could move, calculating angles, weights, distances. Humans were small, fragile, but clever, capable of thinking and adapting in ways no predator could match. He lured the creatures deeper into the trap, each step deliberate, each move precise. The first predator fell into a pit he had disguised with mud and leaves. The second slipped on the slick mud and hit a swinging log. His traps were working, but the last predator, larger, older, and smarter than the rest, paused at the edge, watching, calculating. Kalen's heart pounded. He realized brute force would not work. He needed one last move, something decisive. He sprinted to the edge of the ravine, pulling on the final cable connected to the stabilizer. Energy surged through the wire, lightning-like, and struck a metal outcropping. Sparks flew, blinding the predator for a moment. Seizing the chance, Kalen ran, sliding down the slope, using momentum to dodge claws and tail strikes. The hatchling flapped its small wings in encouragement, chirping as if cheering him on. He reached a narrow ledge, the predator close behind. Kalen looked around, eyes sharp. He spotted a large fallen tree at the perfect angle. With one mighty shove he dislodged it. It crashed down the slope, smashing against rocks and earth. The predator lunged, but the tree pinned it partially, slowing it, trapping it just enough for Kalen to slip past. He grabbed the hatchling again, running toward a cluster of sturdy ruins, his heart hammering. They were safe, at least for the moment. Kalen didn't stop to rest. He knew more predators could be coming. The hatchling chirped softly in his arms, its body trembling less now, sensing the immediate threat was over. He examined it quickly, noting a small scrape along its wing. Nothing serious, but it was a reminder. Victory did not mean safety. Not yet. Humans survived not by strength alone, but by courage, intelligence, and determination, the ability to see danger, calculate risks, and act when others would freeze. Finally, as the sun rose higher, the predators retreated into the fog, cautious, hesitant, defeated for now. Kalen sank to his knees, the hatchling tucked safely against his chest. Exhaustion hit him in waves, but relief was stronger. He had done what most humans could not. He had faced impossible odds and survived. He had protected life not because it was easy but because it was right. The planet had tested him and humans had proven their worth. He looked down at the hatchling, wide-eyed and trembling, and felt a connection that went beyond instinct. This creature had trusted him and he had risked everything to honor that trust. A soft warmth spread through him. On Viridian 9, human courage and ingenuity were more than survival tools. They were a force that could shape the world, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Kalen whispered, "We made it. For now. But we'll survive no matter what comes next." The hatchling chirped in agreement, small wings flapping as if testing strength, ready to face the world alongside its human guardian. The first rays of the twin suns stretched across the plains, painting Viridian 9 in soft gold and pale amber. Kalen Merrick sat on a slope outside the ruined ridge, the hatchling nestled against his chest. The storm, the predators, the relentless night, they were behind him now. But the exhaustion in his body did not dull the clarity of what had happened. He had faced impossible odds, survived, and protected a fragile life that most humans would have abandoned to fate. He looked down at the hatchling, small and trembling, its scales still glinting like molten metal in the morning light. Its wings, tiny but slowly flexing, had survived the night thanks to human ingenuity and courage. Kalen's hands traced over the creature's back, feeling its rapid heartbeat slow. It chirped softly, almost like a wordless thank you, and Kalen smiled faintly, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the suns above. The plains were quiet now, save for the occasional distant bird-like screech. Kalen scanned the horizon and saw signs of movement, not predators but life. Small figures emerged from the distant settlement, drawn by the same twin suns, curious about the smoke from the stabilizer's surge and the chaos of the night. News traveled fast in isolated colonies, and humans would hear of the daring farmer who had faced the storms and predators and survived. That knowledge alone could inspire others, push them to act, to defend, to hope. But even as relief settled over him, Kalen knew the hatchling was not safe yet. Its wing had a small scrape, and its strength was fragile. He had to ensure it would survive the next hours, the next days. He gathered leaves, mud, and bioresin from the crops, fashioning a makeshift splint for the wing. Every movement was careful, deliberate, honed from years of farming and surviving harsh conditions. His mind worked as a human mind always did under pressure. Methodical, inventive, and precise. Survival required more than strength, it required intelligence, planning, and relentless determination. He heard a soft rustle nearby and looked up. A small group of colonists had arrived, cautious but curious. They carried tools, supplies, and cautious hope in their eyes. They had seen the aftermath of the storm, the flattened fields, the smoke, the remnants of traps, and most importantly, the small dragon perched on Kalen's arm. Whispered conversations spread quickly. Some spoke of fear, some of awe, but all of them noticed the courage of one human who had acted when others would have done nothing. Kalen stood slowly, keeping the hatchling secure in his arms. "It's okay," he said softly, addressing the colonists, though his focus remained on the creature. "It's safe now. We'll keep it alive." The hatchling chirped, wings fluttering, as if acknowledging that its life had been saved by a species many considered fragile and weak. Kalen felt a surge of pride, but it was tempered with humility. The planet had tested him and he had passed, but the real challenge was ensuring the hatchling would thrive in a world that did not forgive weakness. The colonists approached, their eyes wide, whispers low. One elder stepped forward, nodding in quiet respect. "You've done what no one else could," she said. "You've shown what humans can be, even here, alone on this world." Kalen nodded, feeling the weight of her words. Humans were small, fragile, and often underestimated, yet when courage, intelligence, and moral resolve combined, they could face storms, predators, and chaos, and survive. Kalen began planning. The hatchling would need care, food, and shelter. The stabilizers could be repaired and repurposed, offering some protection against the next storm. He thought of ways to reinforce the farm, to train defenses, to teach the colonists what he had learned. It was not enough to survive once. Survival had to be sustainable. Humans did not merely endure, they adapted, they innovated, they protected what was precious. As the twin suns rose higher, the hatchling began to explore cautiously, wings twitching, small claws testing the mud. Kalen followed, a guiding hand nearby. He saw intelligence in the creature's eyes, a spark of life that had been at the brink of death just hours ago. He realized that his actions had done more than save one life. They had set in motion a ripple that could inspire hope across the settlement. One human's courage could change the course of many lives. The sky cleared, the fog lifting to reveal the vast plains of Viridian 9. The storm had left scars, but it had also revealed a truth. Humans were extraordinary when pushed to the limits. Fragile bodies, yes, but minds capable of ingenuity, hearts capable of compassion, and spirits capable of courage that no predator or storm could break. Kalen felt the hatchling shift against him, wings fully flexing now, ready to take small leaps. He smiled. Together they had survived, and together they could face whatever the world sent next. Finally, as the settlement stirred with curiosity and awe, Kalen stood tall. He raised his eyes to the horizon, heart steady, mind alert. The plains were dangerous, the storms relentless, the predators unyielding, but he was human. Clever, brave, relentless. And today that had made all the difference. The hatchling chirped once more, tiny wings flapping, and Kalen whispered, "We're not just surviving. We're changing the world." On Viridian 9 that truth would not be forgotten. One human, one act of courage had shifted the balance, and in doing so, proved that humanity could triumph against impossible odds.